Hi everybody, Rich Carrubba here for bowlingball.com. I just posted recently an article that I drafted about bowling great Don Johnson. It's in the editorial section under Bowlversity. Click on Bowlversity button on the home page of bowlingball.com and then click on editorials and you'll see a list of editorial articles. You'll want to read that article and make comments if you wish. He was my favorite champion, and I don't want to really repeat that information in the article or the video that I did. But what I wanted to do, and I didn't have time in the previous video, was offer a second article and this video about Don's favorite bowling tip, Don Johnson's favorite bowling tip. Now, I'm going to paraphrase this, and it may not be exactly words that you might have heard before if you happen to have ever run across Don Johnson prior to his passing in 2003, or watched in his videos, or possibly read about somewhere. But you're gonna have to trust me that my words and what I say to you is as close to being as accurate as possibly can be related. And I watched Don coach students for many, many years. He was a great coach. When he retired from the tour because he had a bad thumb, he couldn't bowl anymore. His thumb just couldn't support the ball. He had all kinds of problems with that, and it cut his career a couple of years shorter than I think it could have been. I still think he could have won when he quit. He was still that capable of winning. And in 1979, I had a pretty good year on tour, and Don was still bowling, but he was telling me all the time he was going to have to stop bowling. Well, he had made an arrangement in Las Vegas to be a coach at a local bowling center at that time, and Don set up. Don took into coaching as passionately as he took to the lanes bowling. His desire, determination, and dedication to be a great coach and to help people that he coached was matched only by his efforts on the lanes. That's how much he loved to do it. And I used to watch him coach people from time to time. When I was in Las Vegas, I would get by and see him. And then years later, when I lived there and I was actually doing some coaching myself at a different center, Don and I would get together socially all the time and discuss coaching, discuss the students, discuss bowling in general. And Don's big thing that he always said, his tip, and I'm gonna use my own words to get the point across. He said, "Don't lift the ball, release it. Release the ball." And what he meant by that was he didn't like to use the old-fashioned lift technique that bowlers were taught for decades. You know, when you make a fist or your fingers come toward the palm of your hand and you try to lift the ball to put extra energy on the ball, extra spin, extra lift, whatever you want to call it. That was leaving us as the urethane era came in, as bowling balls became more scientifically and technologically developed, that produced a strong roll pattern of their own. They didn't need the lifting. In fact, they needed just to be let go, to be released. And he watched films in slow motion. In fact, Don filmed 10 straight years of every telecast on Pro Bowlers Tour, and he had a library, a video library at the time of his passing, which I believe was second to none, other than possibly at the PBA headquarters. So what Don did was studied them in slow motion over and over and over. And I used to go to his house once in a while, watch the shows, and we'd watch it back. And we'd watch what the pros at the time were doing. And we started to notice the power players were taking over, and it was the trend. Well, it matched the bowling balls. It matched the lane conditions. And the power player obviously could outstrike the direction player and the skid player that was predominantly on tour in the 1960s and for the 1970s, you know, with lesser grade or quality bowling balls, rubber balls, the original plastic balls in those years, etc. We would study bowlers like Steve Cook, Mark Roth, Bob Hanley, Marshall Holman, Amleto Monticelli, not to leave any bowlers out, but those bowlers were power players in their era with those bowling balls, and we all watched them with the ball with a little bit of a cup wrist going in, or a bent elbow going into the releasing area, and as the thumb exited the ball, the wrist would actually unhinge, and the ball would fall off their hands or release off their hands. It would come off revving. Some bowlers had a more axis rotation than others, so you would see more spin, or axis tilt as they call it now, than others, but a lot of them had a pretty high roll pattern, which was a lower axis tilt in those years. But nevertheless, all of them would unhinge or uncock the wrist at the moment of release to apply a lot of revs to it. Don saw that coming, and he referred to it as the urethane release. And just as sure as I'm speaking now in this YouTube video clip, I can hear bowlers criticize him back then in the 1990s. 1980s, 1990s for his teachings because they said, urethane release, what's that? What does that mean? Well, Don saw it 20 years before it became popular. And he started teaching that, and today everyone does it. Most of all the great players on tour have that smooth release. Even the most powerful crankers, you don't see them snapping the ball real hard and grabbing and making a fist. They let it go. If you watch carefully at the moment of release, the thumb exits, the fingers will unhinge and rotate, and it'll put a lot of revs on the bowling ball. All that was spotted by Don years ago. He had a good way of teaching it, and he also realized that with release changes come swing path changes. And with a swing path change to match hooking the path you need to follow for a wider angle from release point to the break point and back to the pocket, Don realized you have to change your walking pattern too, the way you take your steps to the foul line to accommodate that. Well, without getting into the specifics of what he taught, he saw that. He was the granddaddy, really, of this modern release that we see used today. Now, there are still players that throw the ball pretty straight, but none of the players that throw the ball straight lift the ball hard. They let it go. Even Walter Ray Williams, Norm Duke, and on, any of the players that you see today on the tour, or in-betweeners or strokers, crankers, whatever kind of players you see, the releases today are clean and smooth, and they match to the bowling balls and the lane conditions quite nicely. Well, I feel Don Johnson was one of the reasons, one of the catalysts in coaching. And for that, his best tip, don't lift the ball, release the ball. I heard it over and over, ladies and gentlemen, and I just think that it's something worth sharing with you. You know, if you take a lesson and you take coaching and you talk to your own coaches about it, I think you're gonna be pleasantly surprised that most of the coaches will not teach you to try to lift the ball as hard as we used to in the 1960s and 1970s, but to let the ball flow off your hand smoothly so you can regulate your ball speed and your angle down the lane and control the loft. Those are the keys. The balls and the pitch angles in the balls and the type of surfaces in these bowling balls you can choose will match to the lane conditions quite nicely if you collaborate with your pro shop and you collaborate with your own bowling coaches. Well, I hope some of this helps you, and I hope it gives you a little understanding and insight into the great PBA legendary Hall of Fame champion Don Johnson. Don't lift the ball, release the ball. Thank you.